Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is my monthly reading wrap-up for June of 2025. So for this monthly reading wrap-up, I'm talking about 3 books. That's all I got through in June. Partly because one of the books was, at least for me, a pretty big book. It took me most of the month. So it's also just, life gets in the way, and I get pretty busy. If you are new to my channel, all of my books here that I have in front of me, I have talked about these more in depth in what are called Fresh Read Kills videos, or in this case, Book Trek videos. So this video here is just a very quick summary of what I read. It is not, I don't call these things reviews. Even my regular videos where I talk about in depth, I don't call those reviews either. Those are just informal discussions. So if you want to know more about what I think about any of these books, I would refer to those other videos. Again, this is just a summary. So to start off, I read 2 books for Historathon 2025, Quarter 2. That's a year-long event where we read nonfiction history, and we divide the year up into quarters, and Quarter 2 just ended, and that looked at the years 500 to 1500. If you wanted to participate, all you have to do is read nonfiction history that looks at that time period. So the last 2 books I read for Quarter 2 were these 2. So first was Powers and Thrones, A New History of the Middle Ages by Dan Jones. A sizable book. I mean, it's almost 600 pages. And my first Dan Jones book that I've read, although I've, of course, heard great things. And I gotta say, from what I read here, I really liked it. I'm eager to read more things by him. This was a very comprehensive but digestible, certainly, totally appropriate for newcomers to the time period. Account of the 1,000-year history of the Middle Ages, from the fall of the Roman Empire to really the Protestant Reformation, and a good chunk of what we would consider the Renaissance, which is here considered still a part of the Middle Ages. He divides the chapters up thematically. They are in roughly chronological order, but they have themes. And within each of those chapters, he really does a great, thorough job. But it's in a way that you don't get lost, you don't get bogged down, but you also don't feel like you're being condescended to, or, like he's holding your hand too much. It strikes a really nice balance, really well written, and a very, very good introduction. Then, so that one took me a couple weeks to read. Then I was able to, once summer began for me, I'm a teacher, so summer vacation began, I was able to get through this pretty quickly. It's a little over 200 pages, but the pages aren't too packed with small script or anything like that, small type, and some of them have images, so I was able to read through this pretty quickly. This is fascinating. Monsters in the Anglo-Saxon world, Basilisks and Beowulf by Tim Flight. So this looks at the way that the Anglo-Saxons viewed monsters. Tim Flight's main focus ends up being on how these monsters, whether they're real or imagined, meaning that they're creatures that really did exist, or maybe mythological, like wolves as opposed to dragons, how they generally viewed monsters as inhabitants of the wild, that civilization represented Christianity, and when you went beyond that, you're basically in the world of Satan, and that's where the monsters live. And they are sort of like border keepers. They don't like you going into their territory, and they will let you know with extreme violence. So that's part of it. By the last part of the book, he is looking much more exclusively at Beowulf, and there he's looking at what really makes a monster as opposed to a human. And then ultimately, is Beowulf a monster? So I thought it was all really well done, very thorough. Again, another one's very readable, but more scholarly. And yeah, I enjoyed this quite a bit. And the last book that I read in June, finished this right when July was beginning, and that is Picard, Second Self. This is, of course, Star Trek, part of the Book Trek reading. Book Trek is a yearly event where in the summer we read nonfiction. No, sorry, not nonfiction, Star Trek fiction. That's the main focus of Book Trek. There are optional away missions, and I'll leave information below on these things if you are curious. But this is the 4th book in the Picard series. I didn't read the 3rd one, but I was curious about this because it's a Raffi-focused book, which that's not a character that necessarily I've, attached myself to. But I knew that it was also something of like a swan song for Garrick. who is more of an enigmatic, really interesting character from DS9. And they do an interesting job with him. I had said that, the middle of the book, we actually see Garrick's perspective, and I wish that had been carried through more in the second half. But, yeah, this is kind of, Raffi, after the first season of Picard, kind of getting back into the intelligence game. She's actually searching for Garrick, who's hiding on a planet. And a lot of it, this title looks at second self. It looks at like second chances, people kind of living second lives, the ones that are very different from what they had before. And so much of it seemed to be about how fortunes can change. You might find yourself on the top, but then you're ultimately going to be on the bottom and somebody else will be above you, or vice versa. So a lot of those themes, I think, work pretty well. Overall, I like the book, but like I said, I wish that Garrick's voice was actually a little more prominent in the second half. I think that would have made it much more effective for me. But that's it. Like I said, 3 books. That's all I got through in June. So those are Power and Thrones, Basilisks and Beowulf, and Picard, Second Self. If you've read any of these, love your thoughts. And as always, thank you, BookTube.